In 1997, you wrote an essay which turned out to be really influential, and it has been much cited over the years. It was titled "The Rise of Illiberal Democracy," and you pointed to a trend, which was, you said that illiberal democracy is now a growth industry, and that democratic means would be used to undermine democracy. But the countries that you pointed to at that time were, your vantage point was in America, and you were pointing to countries like Philippines, you were pointing to countries like Pakistan, and, you were also talking of Peru and the Palestinian Authority. So America at that time was still the country where you drew up the checklist of democracy, and it was the task of other democracies to either fit the bill or fail to do so. 23 or 24 years later, if you had to write that same essay, what would you write differently? Would you bring America into it now?
So to make so that everyone, the viewers understand, the point I was making was that it turns out that when we think of democracy, what we really mean is liberal democracy. And there are two elements to a liberal democracy. One is the democratic element, popular participation, vote, elections. But there's another part, which is the kind of constitutional element, which is sometimes in a sense called the liberal element, meaning protecting liberty, rule of law, separation of church and state, separation of powers, independence of courts, and that those features were being systematically undermined in a lot of countries that had elected governments. So the elected government was then systematically abusing those rights. And that phenomenon I call illiberal democracy. Now, I did write a book a couple of years later in which I talked about the dangers of illiberal democracy, of creeping illiberalism in the United States. But I have to confess, I did not in any way imagine that we would get to the point we have gotten to in the United States right now. But it's not just the United States. It is happening in other countries that are Western, established. It's happening in, places like India. Now, India, I did talk a lot about in the book, because I've always thought that there is a danger of majoritarianism in India, of the majority ruling somewhat arbitrarily and tyrannically. Indira Gandhi, this is one of the great problems we had in the 70s. And of course, it is a problem we have now. I think what the lesson of the deterioration of democracy in America is this. And this is the part I think I didn't adequately understand when I wrote the essay. You can look at systems and say, well, this one is weak because these institutions are new. The courts, independence of the courts is new. The separation of powers is new. They haven't had the time to build. I think what I didn't realize is, institutions they're human. They're fragile by definition. That at the end of the day, an institution is only so strong as the people who are willing to defend it, the people who are willing to uphold it, and that they can shift very easily. I should have realized this, honestly, during the emergency growing up in India.